Morning, my name is Rachel and I'm going to be going through some steps to make an air dry clay botanical mobile. I love plants, all sorts. These ones I foraged from my garden. I also got some while I was out for my morning run. So make sure you have whatever you're going to press, whether it's plants or something else, have that to hand. What you'll also need to start with is your air dry clay, have that handy. I have some just sort of odd bits, egg carton, loo rolls, some rocks. They're not necessary, but if you want your mobile, your sort of botanical tiles to have a bit of a curve or different shapes to them, rather than just being flat, just have something to hand that you can drape those pieces over so that while they're drying, they're taking on a different sort of shape. I also have my rolling pin, a little butter knife, my spoon tool. You can just use a kitchen spoon, that's fine. My tool's a wooden one, but a metal will work just as well. And I have a little stick for poking holes in, because once we've cut out our tiles, in order to hang them up on the mobile, they'll need a hole in them. So you need some kind of tool, whether it's a stick or a knitting needle, whatever you have on hand, something that will poke a hole through your tile for hanging it up later. So that's what we're going to start with, and now we'll begin rolling out our clay. Here's my little ball of clay. You don't want to start with too much, otherwise it'll dry out too quickly. So just start with a small ball of clay and begin rolling. While you're rolling, every once in a while, lift up the clay, a bit like you would with pastry, just to keep it moving on the back side, because what it tends to do is get stuck to the tablecloth and then it doesn't want to roll out as well. But every once in a while, just give it a lift and that will help. So what we're going to do is roll it out to about 2 millimeters thick. If you want it a bit thicker, that's fine. I wouldn't go too much thinner, otherwise your tiles will become quite fragile and brittle. So just about a 2 millimeter thickness. Nearly there now. About right, if you can see that. So that is ready. As you can see, it's quite durable. It's not tearing while I'm lifting it up. So that's ready, and I'm going to begin pressing my plants in now. So to start with, I've chosen some Japanese acer leaves from our garden, the tree in our garden. They're just starting to unfurl and they're lovely. Get your spoon tool, and the reason for using a tool rather than just your fingertip is that the pads of our fingertips are squishy and the clay is squishy, and so we can't really get a proper surface to get the imprint of those leaves or flowers or whatever into the clay with just our fingertips. It needs a hard, unyielding surface like a spoon to really get all of those veins pressed in and the edges of the leaves. And the clay will take the impression of all of those things. So I've got my apple blossom next that I'm pressing in. I'm not going to press everything in, all of the blossoms and buds, but I just want the idea that they're there, because there's a bit too many. Some things, like I've got the 2 leaves here, that's perfect as it is, but there are too many buds here and leaves to press all of them in. So I'm going to just pick a few to press in to the clay. You'll also find that some plants really stick in well, like these acer leaves, and other plants really won't want to. They'll peel back straight away. As long as they're pressed in once, it doesn't matter if they peel back, because before we set our shapes, our tiles aside to dry, we're going to peel everything off anyways. Another little tip that I have is if you're pressing flowers in, open flowers, press them in face down so that you get all of the middle parts of the flower showing up from your impression in the clay. And then after you've pressed all the petals and the stamens and pollen bits and everything, once you've pressed them in, then go back and lay the stem down wherever you want the stem to kind of feature, and press the stem in last. These are my clematis, so I've picked a curlicue clematis as well of one of the leaves that I'll lay down as well. So I'm going to fill all of this up, and once I've filled it all up, then I'm going to begin cutting around these pieces and laying them aside. So I have my clay completely filled up now, as much as I can, and I'm going to begin cutting around my botanical tiles. I just have a little butter knife. It's actually my toddler's butter knife to do the cutting. Whatever you have to hand is fine. While you're cutting, just be careful not to stretch the clay. Do little cuts, and I'll demonstrate in just a minute, because the air dry clay tends to be a bit stretchy because of what it's made of. So just to keep that in mind as you're cutting. So I'm just slowly moving the knife along. Any ragged edges you can sort of smooth out once you're finished cutting it out. While you're cutting, also remember to leave space for a hole to hang your tile from the mobile. If you want that hole to be in the botanical piece itself, that's fine. If you don't want the hole in the impression, then leave a bit of extra space from which to hang it, and I'll show you by way of example as I'm cutting around this fiddlehead. Once I get back round to the base, I'm going to just leave, I'm not going to cut in right here. I'm going to leave a bit of a space in between the stem and the leaf so that I can poke my hole in. Just gently separate those. There we go. Also, as you're cutting, when you get scraps, take those scraps and set them aside. Have a plastic bag or an airtight container handy and put those scraps right away so that they don't dry out, because you can rework and reuse those scraps. So I've got my first piece here. I'm going to get my stick tool, just going to poke a hole where I want that to hang. There we go. And I'm going to peel this off now as well. So I have a lovely impression of a fiddlehead there. Now I'm going to set this in my egg carton, give it a little bit of a twist so that as it hangs down there's some movement to the piece. I'm going to carry on cutting these out, putting their holes in, and then I'll come back and go over what's next. Also, just as a bit of a note, for when you're doing this with children and cutting out the tiles, a butter knife is a really good option, because then there's no accidents. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so we're familiar with butter knives. However, if you're looking for a bit more detail in your cutting, you can choose a sharper tool. I have a pottery tool that has just a cleaner edge to it than a butter knife. And it does allow me to get a bit more detail into my cutting. It's completely up to you, both work, but for a cleaner cut you can get a slightly sharper knife than a butter knife. Right, here are all my little tiles, cut out, holes put in, and placed to dry. Hello, so our next step is to begin painting our botanical tiles. I'm using watercolours that I've borrowed from our daughters, so they don't have to be very fancy, but you want a paint that will go on lightly, so nothing too thick, because the thick paints will obscure the beautiful detail that you can get, or that you'll have from pressing your plants into the air dry clay, and we want that to show up rather than to disappear. So choose a paint or water down a paint so it's nice and light. Watercolours obviously are perfect for that. And once we're all finished with painting, we'll let these dry. Because you've added water to the air dry clay, it'll soften up slightly. So finish painting, let these dry, and then we'll begin assembling the mobile. So you can see how the paint takes shape on the air dry clay. I'll have a go at painting one of my tiles. I've chosen my clematis. It's in full bloom at the moment. My view from our kitchen window, it's absolutely amazing. I'm just loving all the spring blooms. I'm sure everyone is. The clematis is one of my favourites because we planted it shortly after we moved here, and I was quite heavily pregnant at the time. But we have our view out the kitchen window, you know, where you do all the washing up and you want something nice to look at, was an ugly block wall, sort of breeze blocks, and I just wanted to cover it up, and the clematis hasn't let me down. So I get this lovely view instead, and it's wonderful. So as I'm adding these paints, I'm just gonna water them down as well. If you brush over where you've put the colour, the detail begins to emerge. I'm also going to be doing the back side of my tiles, because I've given my tiles shape. They're going to be a bit twisty and turny as I hang them up, and so I want there to be a bit of colour all the way around. So that's a start, and I will finish off my tiles, and then we can get the last stage going. So on to mobile making or assembling. I've grouped my botanical tiles into 14 pieces. Some of them I'm going to hang together, like my yarrow leaves. I've done 3 leaves, but I'm going to string them up together. Whereas some, like the primrose, I'll keep separate. So I know that I've got 14 that I want to hang, so I need 14 holes drilled in my mobile. And I've just gone with a pencil and marked each hole that I want to drill. You can drill with just a simple hand drill. I don't know what the pieces on it are called, but there's one that's good for wood. So that's what I'm going to use to drill my holes. The same as what I did when I first drilled these holes to bring the branches together. I'll also just add, if you're doing something similar to me where you're using branches and drilling holes, things like that to make your mobile, when you're drilling the holes, work from the outside in, because if you work from the inside out, you're weakening the branch as you're moving out, and you don't want it to break while you're drilling it. So start from the outside and work in, just a little tip. The holes. Just finishing up hanging the last of my botanical tiles onto my mobile, and I'll just show you what I've done in case you're doing something similar to me as far as the structure of the mobile is concerned. So on the back I've threaded through a piece of twine through the hole that I created in my tile, and I've made a knot so that it doesn't slip through. I'm then going to take the other end and feed that through one of the holes that I drilled earlier, and just create kind of a loose knot to get it to stay in place so that I can finish hanging the other one and then adjust the heights as I want to. So I'll hang my strawberry leaf and my strawberry flowers as well, and then we'll sort of lift it up a bit and just see where they're all hanging. Some of the twine ends have threaded through really easily. Others have been a bit harder. So if you've got any sort of like pokey tool, knitting needle, something like that, something that will just give it a bit of help if you're struggling. Just get it all the way poked through. There we go. And I'll create a loose knot in that and see where they're hanging. It's better to start with too much twine or thread, string, whatever you're using. Start with too much, because then you can cut the extra off. It's frustrating if you don't if you've gone through like all the knotting and the threading and you don't, you're just shy an inch or something. So I'll just draw this little bit more and we'll see where we're at. So I'm really happy with how all of these are hanging now, and I'm going to go through and snip off the ends just so that they're a bit closer to the knots, and then it will be finished. Oh, one more up here. A few more up here. There we go. Here's my mobile all hung up. I've really enjoyed this creative project, and I hope you all have too.